NATO foreign affairs ministers are putting their heads together in Brussels this week. And South Korea is also taking part for the third straight year. For more, we're joined by VOA correspondent Chris Casquejo. Welcome.
Good to be with you.
The two-day meeting of NATO ministers of foreign affairs is taking place in Brussels from Wednesday. Chris, what are they up to?
Well, events in the Middle East are likely to take center stage at the NATO foreign ministers meeting. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Paris for talks with senior officials, including French President Emmanuel Macron. Blinken arrived hours after an Israeli airstrike in central Gaza late on Monday killed 7 aid workers with World Central Kitchen, which is a disaster relief group based in Washington. Earlier in the day, a suspected Israeli warplane bombed Iran's embassy in Syria. Iran said it killed 7 of its military advisors, including 3 senior commanders. Analysts say this marks a major escalation in Israel's war with its regional adversaries. Also on Monday, France proposed a draft UN Security Council resolution that seeks options for possible UN monitoring of a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and proposals to help the Palestinian Authority assume responsibilities. Now, you might remember the United States last week abstained from a vote to allow the 15-member council to demand an immediate ceasefire for the Muslim fasting month of Ramadan, which ends next week. The NATO foreign ministers are meeting this week ahead of a meeting of NATO countries' world leaders in July here in Washington, D.C.
So a lot on the agenda. Now, it's not just the NATO foreign ministers. South Korea, like I mentioned, has been invited to the meeting for the third straight year again. Now, why is South Korea invited again? I mean, what does that mean for South Korea?
Well, it's all part of NATO's effort to deepen its collaboration with South Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, the 4 Pacific region countries were previously invited to NATO summit meetings in 2022 and 23, and New Zealand's foreign minister, along with South Korea's foreign minister, will attend this week's meetings, but Japan's and Australia's will not. Korean Foreign Minister Cho is expected to discuss the current security situation in the Indo-Pacific region and express Seoul's commitment to strengthening cooperation with NATO, his office said. Separately, Cho will meet with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg and hold bilateral talks with foreign ministers of other major countries. Now, at a meeting last year with South Korean President Yoon Stoltenberg commended South Korea for its support of Ukraine, saying that Russia's war in Ukraine shows how security is not regional but global. Seoul and NATO have been cooperating on issues such as cyber defense, counterterrorism, and arms control. And as you recall, South Korea opened a diplomatic mission to NATO in November 2022.
So it'll be almost inevitable for the foreign ministers to discuss the war over in Ukraine and also other emerging and new security challenges. Should we expect them to issue a collective voice here? I mean, what is the latest on U.S. aid to Ukraine as well?
Well, we can expect some sort of joint statement from this foreign ministers meeting, which is standard after these types of summits. Now, the U.S. Congress left Washington for a break without deciding on supplemental funding on a bill to arm Ukraine and other allies. Republicans who oppose the funding say Congress should spend its money on domestic concerns, while Ukraine blames ammunition shortages for contributing to recent territorial losses. Meanwhile, the Republican-led U.S. House of Representatives has failed to throw Kyiv a lifeline, refusing to bring a vote on a Senate-passed emergency spending bill with $60 billion to support Ukraine. The U.S. Army says it needs to produce 100,000 155mm rounds per month starting next year in 2025 to replenish the more than 2 million rounds the U.S. has sent to Ukraine and to keep giving Kyiv enough rounds to defend itself against Russia's aggression. The U.S. defense industry will not reach that goal, defense leaders say, without supplemental funding from Congress. So time is really of the essence here with the U.S. Congress to get something done for Ukraine in its war against Russia.
Definitely. Plus, apparent arms deals between North Korea and Russia will no doubt be part of the talks, right?
Yeah, given the presence of the 2 Pacific region countries' foreign ministers, that's a reasonable expectation. Meanwhile, U.S. intelligence officials told the Congress last month that North Korea has been granted some concessions by Russia in exchange for its support of its war in Ukraine. but warning that the impact still remains to be seen. But U.S. Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines added that while Russia, China, and Iran and North Korea are going closer, the prospects for a true alliance among those nations appear to be remote, at least in the intelligence view of U.S. officials.
Right, and on top of the NATO foreign ministers meeting, the NATO summit will take place in July, and that's ahead of the U.S. presidential election in November. Chris, before I let you go, where do the U.S. presidential candidates stand on NATO at the moment?
Well, NATO has grown since former President Donald Trump threatened to withdraw from the security alliance. Sweden and Finland joined the alliance over the last year, and its biggest expansion since the fall of the Soviet Union allowed Eastern Europeans to join NATO. U.S. President Joe Biden says standing up to Russian aggression together shows that NATO is working. Meanwhile, Trump, who is the presumptive Republican nominee for president, caused an uproar when he suggested in February on the campaign trail that Russia could do whatever the hell you want, his words, to the NATO countries he contends are failing to pay their fair share in security costs.
All right, thanks, Chris, for your report today. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you.